Hello and welcome back to another review of Three Body Problem. I'm your host Christina. We're here for the second episode, Red Coast, written by Rose Cartwright, directed by Derek Tassang. I'm not quite sure if I have a grasp of what this show is meant to be about, which is fine. How many episodes do they have? I think they have at least 10, right? Okay, they have 8. So I hope by episode 4, I have a better idea of what the trajectory is going to be. Right now, I can't really give you a cohesive overview because things were a little scattered all over the place, and thus it felt as if I have no emotional connection at any point to what is happening because we're not taking enough time with the characters to actually understand them. So while I'm still intrigued by the extraterrestrial aspect of it all, and Ye being in a position I know at least everyone at one point in 2020 was at, like, you know what? Just come, aliens, and take us the fuck over. We don't know what we're doing. And I think it's better if we had more controlled overlords that appreciate the things that humans clearly continue to put above all else. And mainly it's human life. So she just felt in that moment relatable. But otherwise, everything in the present just feels offbeat. We start with Saul's character just rolling over to Ye's home, lighting the incense, or is it incense? For her, but then just picking up her remote and making himself way too comfortable, in my opinion, which leads to Ye asking him what he feels about the flickering lights. And despite being there, he's like, no, it's a fucking deep fake because it didn't show up on any satellite. So it must be a deep fake that everybody in the universe saw, because that's an answer. I feel like that is the biggest shovel of
I'm in denial
I've ever seen just digested down someone's throat. Then later on proceeded to drop acid with women hanging on his every word as if he at all represents what anyone would consider, attractive. I didn't ask them to cast this actor for this particular Playboy type of role. I just don't see him catching them the way in which the show is trying to portray that he would be catching them. And while sure he was high at the moment that the stars were blinking, that it's all over the news and everyone's reacting casually. Like, wouldn't there be riots out in the streets and shit? Like, people just losing their mind? Because it's one thing if a small group of people see something. It's another thing if everybody if 1.2 million people saw the same thing. You can't just hush that shit and be like, well, what was that? It's like, no, most people are going to leap to a lot of conclusions and start rating and acting irrational because we're emotional creatures first, which means we're going to act irrationally. So that everybody was just casually going about their business felt very unrealistic. Very unrealistic. Back in China, well, I guess we'll save the China bit for the end because that's the only bit that feels more palatable. Going back to Auggie, she goes to her meeting. She meets up with Jen, who gives her a hug, and she's like, whatever you decide, it's the right decision. You don't know that. You have no idea if what she is deciding is the right decision. I know if I was watching my life expectancy clock down before my eyes, I don't even think I would have wasted the time in making sure the technology worked. I would have shut the shit down and said, look, I can't explain myself. You just gonna have to move on. And I don't know. I think that living, though, would have been the priority to get the answers to the why. Then Clarence just rolls up to her, and instead of introducing himself as a police officer, which is normal, she has to ask, why are you following me, basically? And then they go into his office where she proceeds to smoke. They find out that someone scrubbed the footage of the woman that was talking to her, and he doesn't know why. She goes, I'm not important. Bitch, what do you mean? You just proved game-changing technology and you think that you're unimportant? So much so that someone with powers far beyond what should be humanly possible put a death hit on you that you could see?
Oh dear, we are in trouble.
He asked if she was close with Vera Ye, and she's like, yeah, at one point. Then I dropped out of her class and pursued applied science. And she said, I disappointed her by that choice. And he said maybe that's why she killed herself.
Whoa, that's like fucking mean.
Then she calls Saul, who doesn't pick up despite how many times that she calls him, because he wants to go drop acid in a field somewhere. Didn't give two shits about the fact that she had a countdown on her life. Or the fact that she had a huge presentation that day. He decided to just show up on her doorstep. So when she said you're a child and it's not cute anymore, I wholeheartedly agreed. And that was the last we saw of her this entire episode, and him. And it wasn't a loss. Jen starts playing the game she found that Vera was playing before she died. And she's told that this is Civilization 137. She meets the captain of the West. He's going to see the Emperor Zhao. The Empire is chaotic or stable, and they have to figure out which time it is or something to that effect. They're hiding from the sun. A lot of mentions of the sun in this episode. And the girl who's just called the follower, there's not enough shade for her, so she gets pushed out and dehydrated.
What the fuck is this shit?
I'm just gonna say it. Most of the effects, like 90%, were shit ass. This was one of them. He explains, the captain of the West, that people just dehydrate until it's time, until it's safe. And that's how we retain life. There's some analogy in here. I know there is. I just don't feel like this show quite yet deserves my brain using that much expanding power, because water, life, all of life comes from the ocean, so on and so forth. Jen then invites Jack. Well, first she goes to the temple to see Emperor Zhao. And she's saying that he is just doing speculation, not science. Zhao doesn't know what the fuck science is. And so goes with what the mystical man says. And decides that he's right, because he wants to know when will it be safe to hydrate the masses. He tells him 8 days. Clarence, he's spying on Jen, who invites Jack over to partake, but when he puts it on,
access denied.
Finishing up with Jen, she goes and rehydrates her little follower, but then she becomes Frosty the follower. When instead of 63 years of prosperous times, they get winter and everyone is frozen. She's like, well, you weren't able to save this world, but you did prove that science wins over mysticism every time and should continue to do so if we have any chance, and there's too many of us still, we need to crack open like a walnut. Clarence, I feel like his story of being or having a deceased wife who died of cancer, and then we have another character who has stage 4 cancer. These things were inserted in such a clunky manner because he's just at her gravesite. The crazy chick shows up at the cemetery to talk to him and talks about how her dad also passed away and she leaves him sweets. And it turns out her dad shot himself in the head. It's all good though, because it was a good, quick death.
Creeper. Oh, man.
She very much came off as a police officer, someone as a person of interest, because she was making herself entirely too familiar. And I know it's a graveyard, but most people are not that chatty at a graveyard. Who is Edith Marsh? That's a name we have to write down. Jack really wanted to play the game, even though both of them said they shouldn't play the game because it's entirely too realistic. But it turns out if they get killed in the game, they at least don't get killed in real life, even though he did taste blood. And when he gets home, he gets his own headset, since they definitely got his DNA, and invite him to play, except instead of in Japan or China. I'm sorry, I don't want to misrepresent, but they may have had the same little thing. I don't know. But he is in England. He's greeted by the Chancellor, or the Privy Councillor, and another little girl, but she's dressed up like a little Anne Boleyn. But Jack decides he just wanted to keep punching this dude because when he introduced himself as Jack Rooney, he told him to pick a better name. I don't get the off humor, and I'm not sure about the intention of it. It just feels sometimes misplaced. Then you had the whole scene with the guy that I didn't even remember because I was like, who's this random guy we're learning about? But I did like what he was talking about in class about how consciousness exists in multiple worlds. When it ends in one world, it continues on in another. This is like the multi-universe something theory. And then the next minute, and then I realized he was in the first episode. And then the next minute, he's talking to Jack, who's just going on and on and on about this game that feels way more advanced, and he even admits is way more advanced than it should ever be, and that doesn't seem to worry anyone, especially as supernatural things are happening to her other friend, like a death countdown. So, Jen, what's up with your decision making?
Then get your shit together. Get it all together and put it in a backpack. All your shit. So it's together.
So yeah, he just drops that he has stage 4 cancer, and Jack's like, I don't accept your defeat in the face of certain death. He's like, bitch, I'm not an idiot. I'm like, you're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. But the doctors are saying, now I know we can always have a positive attitude, but I also know if it's spread all over your body, you're kind of asking for a miracle. So putting things into perspective and making peace with the time you have while you have it versus spending all your time on hope that simply the statistics do not favor, then making him eat, being like, try Will. I'm like, I get that you're devastated over this news, but to reject it, that's kind of much. But, you know, I get it. It's his friend. He doesn't want to face it. Another bit of denial or being denied. Someone is watching their games, though. I don't know who this person is, but it's someone. Clarence then goes to his boss, who hasn't had a name yet. Someone complained in the company about him smoking in his office, so he sacked him because that person was focused on... That was another bit of something that was supposed to be humorous, but I'm like, well, that's a dick move. He tells him about the wow signal. No one can decode it. I've heard about this wow signal as well. An observatory in northeast China in 1977, also, as well as Ohio, got the signal. And who was in China in 1977? Well, it was Mike Evans, the man who owns the largest oil company. Is that what he said? Yeah, biggest privately held oil company on the planet, Evans Energy. Narcissistic much? So what he has to do with anything, we don't know, but he knew Ye in the past. And he's played a younger version by the somewhat hot-looking actor from Why the Last Man. I kept seeing his face going, I know him from somewhere. I'm going to find out what I know him from, and I did. And I think that is a perfect segue into the past, because there's not much in the present that I want to talk about. So Ye, they have been broadcasting, she finds out, speaking with Yang, that they've been sending out, come to our world to work together to build a better life. Although humanity absolutely does not have its shit together. So if they do come, we will be enslaved. That's just, I feel like that's a fact. And in their eyes, it'll be for our betterment. And there's part of me that feels that the ones that'll be weaned out are the ones that need to be weaned out. Like, these are the problems. We don't need these problems. China is behind in the contact extraterrestrial game, as Russia and America have been at it longer. Wouldn't be surprised. Yang goes on and on about how we can't be the only ones in the universe, but Ye's like, where's everybody the fuck at? We've had nothing. But at least this particular evolutionary trajectory, which is still hopelessly infantile, will possibly, or more likely, be snuffed out in its cradle.
Hey, you deserve that death, you fuckhead!
All cynicism aside, I'm sure this show is, at least I think, trying to show the progress of humanity as well. Because while I am certainly a hard critic, I'm not unaware of the betterment of, despite sometimes the over dramaticism of current times. Ye is racking up admirers, ain't she? She had the one dude at the camp, and now she got Yang, and both of them fucking betrayed her, because she was trying to explain the math to him, and the math wasn't mathing, and I don't blame Yang in that moment, because I didn't understand the fucking words she was saying. Even when she simplified it, he still needed to say the words out loud, because I was not getting it. And she points out that basically, let's use the sun as an antenna so that China can lead interstellar communication. So this is her new way of really coming to terms with how she can still serve her country, but her country is in the hands of the Mao regime and he is the Red Sun, so no. To which Ye replies, "How about I do anyway?" No one knows that she has done this. What did he say? You was working together for 8 years or 6 years? Ye goes to see Mike, asks why he's here. He wants to save lives, but not humans, because we are thinking of ourselves only as the only species worthy of a life to be saved. And I don't think that that's apt, because I know a few other creatures in this world that definitely deserve life more than we do, just on a fundamental level. But I digress. She and he, of course, share looks, because like I said earlier, she got that milkshake that brings all the boys to the yard. And she also is very much into nature, so that he planted all these trees and that he values human nature over, or nature over human nature. They make a bond where she says, look, hey, we're taking your land because it's not really your land. It belongs to the state, because we're going to build a toxic thing here. And I will do my best to try to stop that, but know that something about nature is not alone. Didn't write it down. Yang sees this and he is even more convinced, because he's jealous, that they're definitely taking this dude's land. But he makes it up to her by saying, hey, remember that girl that killed your dad? She's in a labor camp. You want to have a chat with her? So she goes and has a chat with her. And I really like this conversation. I think this was the strongest moment in the episode. Really well acted from both actresses, because it made sense. She's missing an arm. She fell into this mindset and she committed crimes in the name of revolution due to a position in society that made it very right for these young kids to be radicalized. And we all know the science behind, the human mind, that it simply isn't as developed as it should be in the intelligence department and it's not an excuse, but I don't know. That girl looked about 15 when she killed her dad, and I like her back and forth. Like, I was a child too when you took him from me. So that excuse of you being a child, well, imagine the trauma I experienced. But she's like, you don't get it. You still have a place here. You still have value here. I still don't have value here. And even though I don't have value here, I still stood behind it, and I will continue to stand behind it, because it's the only thing I have. And she said something to the fact I really like you were smarter not to fall into it. And that is your blessing. Like, that you were not a slave to being mentally manipulated. And she says, you're not going to repent, are you? And she's like, no, why would I repent? Who's going to repent for me? And so this leads to a big moment where in the middle of the night, the wow signal happens. It's a message from outer space from a person that says, I'm a pacifist. It's a good thing that I got this message first, after saying don't answer about 1 million times. If you respond, we will come and we will conquer your world. And after thinking it over and considering the events of her life, Ye's like, why the fuck not? We cannot help ourselves. I will help you take over this world. So is she complicit in because I can see her and Mike totally be complicit in letting the aliens take over. But what does that mean about her daughter? Because her daughter just committed suicide, and clearly she probably wanted to save the world. I'm not sure where her feelings lay in the present, but I can't think that it changed too much. Or maybe it did. I have no clue. But once you put that shit out in the universe, you can't take it back. So is this why certain things are happening? That if certain technology is created, it will help fight back against it? I have no clue why they want the people who've all died, some who've kept working, some who unfortunately kept working or stopped working because they were stopped by death itself. So I'm very confuddled on what the game has to do with the events in the past. I gave this episode a 7.8 out of 10. Everything that's happening in China in the past is still and continues to be right now the saving grace of the series, because I just do not jive with anyone in the present. Jen's acting, I'm sorry, it is just so flat that I have a hard time, especially this episode where she was heavily focused, not feeling very sluggish in her scenes. If you want to send feedback or you have different opinions and you want to rebuttal, blackgirlcouch@gmail.com, or you agree as well, you can leave a comment below. My social media will be there as well. Like, share, subscribe from wherever platform you're listening to. Until the next time, peace, hair grease, and blacker magic.